Ballston, Virginia, July 12, 1967. Civil rights agitators prepare for a march. While all are prepared to sacrifice their Saturday, some will sacrifice much more. Throughout history, zombies have been among the most oppressed and reviled beings on the planet.
You know, from the very beginning of recorded history, man has feared the zombie, believing his mere existence to be some sort of threat to human civilization. Why? Well, it could be because, the zombie would eat people and their families, but there's no way to be sure.
Historically, in America, the only time that you see zombies and man playing a really active role in each other's world was sporadically during times of war and conflict.
During the era of American expansion, attempts to use zombies to reduce Native American populations often had unforeseen consequences. It was not until the 1950s, with the age of automation in full swing, that zombies were found to have a plethora of new uses.
They were used as crash test dummies. The US government stockpiled them for fear of a zombie gap with the Soviets. They were even used by the cosmetics industry to test new products. It was as if every new technology brought with it new forms of exploitation.
But the zombies' new place in industry didn't sit well with some. In 1959, the Flerman Act was passed through Congress.
It's all right there. It was a license to slaughter zombies. All aspects of zombies' lives became regulated. There were laws about where they could live, how they could live, where they could eat, how they could eat, what they could eat. There were many, many laws about eating.
The American zombie was getting restless, but things were about to change. The 1960s was a time of great social progress, but while other minorities made hard-fought headway, zombies were stuck in a rut.
What, you had a group that couldn't effectively argue for their own rights. They couldn't really argue or talk at all. It was as if a nation of mutes was being oppressed, or, people with debilitating mouth injuries. Any group that can't talk. Deafs.
And like those deafs, they needed a voice, a group to stand with them as one. The beatnik, previously at the center of American counterculture, now found himself marginalized. The hippie, with his long hair and promiscuous nature, was the new face of youthful rebellion.
I think it's true that people felt the world was passing us by. We were standing on the sidelines and that ship had left the harbor. Choo-choo. So many people we'd known, really known, were copping out and going for the brass ring. Wife, half a kid, suburbs, dog, dinner.
On March 6, 1965, in Pennsylvania, beatnik Hugh Huge Deal McIntosh first saw a zombie in the flesh. As a group of zombies moved into Monroeville Center from adjacent Turtle Creek, the Army was waiting for them. From his seat on a public bench, Huge Deal witnessed the Army's emergency dispersal policy firsthand. Huge Deal took the story of the massacre he had witnessed to his beat compatriots, who, without jobs or interesting subjects about which to write poetry, embraced the zombie cause wholeheartedly.
Think about the world. And think about all the materialism and all the pain. All that comes from want and desire. An Indian said that. Now, zombies were the only people free from all that. Is that why they were less than?
Oh, this was a singular moment in the movement's history. You had young people who, for the first time, really felt like the status quo just had to go. It was the first time that talk about this was coming out in even a limited way in the public discourse, because the idea of zombie rights was still quite radical. So it's no wonder that you had a group of radicals calling attention to it.
I first became involved with the zombie struggle in college. I'd been involved with a lot of movements and causes, but it was just so hard sometimes to get people energized. But with this, we really felt like we could change things, like we could make things better. And also, there were entry-level leadership positions, which, certainly didn't have with Woman's Lib.
Zombies not talking, but walking. 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 Walking round in a circle. A circle can be a prison, but it can also be a window.
Despite the best efforts of Greater Pittsburgh's beatnik community, it seemed most people did not know about the plight of the zombie, and even fewer cared.
Well, I don't know that much about zombies. I know they bite you, and I know they're communists.
There goes the neighborhood. Can't even go to the grocery store. It's not just one, it's not just two, it's the whole damn neighborhood.
The rising tide of anti-zombieism found its voice with Carolina Junior Senator Tad Reverend.
I believe a government has a duty to protect its majority population from unsavory and unscrupulous elements that would try to impose their way of life onto them. Well, that's the basis of democracy. And I, sir, stand today and shall always stand for democracy.
Tad Reverend was a real firebrand. And, he really tapped into the anxiety of the time. A lot of people discount his impact now, I think, because he was just such a blustery, kind of cartoonish fellow. But when you think about it, a lot of people watch cartoons.
If a zombie is a man, he is not a man like you or I. And if the zombie has a soul, it is not a soul like yours or mine. And if the zombie has a brain, he would be wise to stay out of the great state of Carolina. Yes!
When word reached Reverend's office that a group of zombies was attempting to register at Sesame State College, he vowed to personally keep zombies from entering the campus. The crowd was devoured in under 10 minutes.
Well, what happened at Sesame State was made all the more tragic because the zombies in that incident were not trying to register. Now, Reverend fled the scene, and ironically, he was found in a town nearby in a barn. So certainly that was ironic.
Reverend was an oddity, though, in that he addressed the issue at all. Most politicians prefer to remain silent on the zombie question, which is what made the Mitcham Declaration so significant.
The rights preserved in our Constitution were meant for all men, and have no doubt been denied to many in the past who have clamored for freedom. But I will not be convinced such rights should be extended to the likes of zombies until I hear such an appeal from a zombie itself.
It was devastating. Here is a respected member of the judicial community acting with such coldness, such... That was when my sisters and I knew we had to step up and transform this movement into something more powerful. McIntosh and Putman and Scroat were fine orators, but many people in the movement felt that they were just not fit to lead. This movement deserved something more than just a poetry reading here and a sleep in there. They weren't doing anything.
We tried in our own way. And some people in the movement were getting antsy because they said we weren't doing anything.
We took matters into our own hands. We formed the National Allied Zombie Initiative. And we had rallies and picket lines and boycotts. We really got their attention. Yes, it's still our name. Why do you ask?
This was a more militant offshoot of the movement that preceded it. Of course, when I say more militant, I only mean in comparison to the original movement, which was striking in its lack of militancy.
This was a singular moment in the movement's history, you know, because there was a real split now. Whereas before, initially, the zombie rights movement had focused on what you might call passive resistance. Now the focus was on what you might call passive aggression. Well, maybe I wouldn't phrase it exactly like that. No, maybe I would. Yeah, that works.
It did work, and it would change history. In Ballston, Virginia, on July 12, 1967, the National Allied Zombie Initiative rallies to bring widespread attention to their cause.
Well, the idea behind Ballston was that zombies left on their own were not guaranteed to be violent. You know, that if you let 100 zombies march through Washington, the next day, Washington would still be there. It was a very noble idea.
The plan called for 100 zombies to march on Washington. The zombies, accompanied by stewards, were to assemble for a rally in Ballston, Virginia, and make their way to the steps of the U.S. Capitol.
That was such an amazing thing to experience. Really. Wow. Yeah, we were, of course, none of us there. We hadn't organized it. We didn't know it was happening. We were busy with our own rally in Puxatawney, which was a combination pro-zombie sit-in and bake sale, which garnished a whole lot of press.
There was a lot of excitement in the air. Marchers just kept pouring in, and the sun started to rise. And I remember I turned to Gabby Greer, who was there with me, and I said, "This is beautiful. We're going to make the front page tomorrow." And of course, I was right.
Though reports differ widely, what is certain is at some point prior to leaving their rally point near Arlington National Cemetery, several marchers began to diverge from the main group.
You can blame the Army. You can blame the organizers. You can certainly blame the Park Services for approving the permits, but at the end of the day, this was not a one-sided thing. After all, 3 guardsmen died. 5 if you count the 2 who were reanimated after the fact.
But what looked like the movement's darkest day became its finest hour. From the ashes of a massacre rose a man who would become the voice of the zombie rights movement.
Stand fire! On my mark!
They just talked to me, sir.
They don't talk, Doc.
My happy wagon. It's talking, sir.
Oh my God.
His name, when asked, was Chocolate Chip. No one knew where he came from, or even his last name. But he was the first zombie to speak for himself, and the world was ready for what he had to say.
I'm the mayor of Browntown. I don't like the daytime moon. It hurts my face hole.
I first met him at the Allegheny Hills Howard Johnson's at a rally fundraiser in '67. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and when he first saw me, he just stared straight at me for like a minute. And then he just ran full bore at me, screaming something about like wood or like wooden clowns. I can't recall. He was just the kind of person, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room.
Almost entirely because of Chocolate Chip's high profile, support for zombie rights reached an all-time high.
This was just a singular moment in the movement's history. You know, kids on college campuses now saw this as a cause that they could maybe sort of, you know, probably kind of get behind. It was a heady time.
How can the president tell a man what to do? And who could tell a zombie his heart isn't true? And even the dead can bleed red, white, and blue. 'Cause this country was made for me and for you. La-da-dee-day, la-dee-da-da-dee-day. And dee-dee-dee-day, da-dee-dee-da-dee-day.
Peter, how did you come to choose the zombie civil rights movement?
Funny thing, it chose me. I was in the market for a new racket. I went in the store. I saw this beauty. Stu Goldberg makes this racket.
Stu Goldberg, he was a guest on this show a few years back.
Now a zombie.
I had no idea.
Zombie.
Chocolate Chip, do you know Stu Goldberg?
Goldberg.
You know Stu, right?
Stu, right.
I don't eat the racket.
The nation's change in attitude towards zombie rights was reflected in the landmark ruling Z v. Dakota, which for the first time found that force against a zombie was illegal unless in self-defense.
This is a momentous day for anyone who believes in basic rights for all peoples, regardless of creed, color, or decomposition. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Chip and his constituents who are here today.
I had an apple in my shoe, but it died.
Are you going to run for office?
It was the last speech he would ever give. April 14th, 1969. On his way to a rally in support of the controversial Reanimated Americans Act, Chocolate Chip is gunned down.
You get a false sense of security around greatness. You think someone's invincible. I thought that he could live forever. Literally.
You know, he was our Rosa Parks. Hey, lady, don't drive that bus. He drove that bus. All over.
The assassin, Roger Bart Tinsdale, drowned while in police custody. An unemployed elevator operator from Delaware, Tinsdale was known as a virulent anti-zombite, possibly stemming from a 1962 incident involving his family.
The government will tell you. Tinsdale, lone nut, end of story. Goes shopping. Just forget about it. Shh. So this Tinsdale may or may not have had a family. that could have allegedly been eaten, allegedly by zombies, allegedly. But, irregardless, the facts are on the ground, man. Just pick them up.
But the most shocking news was yet to come. An investigation into his death revealed that Chocolate Chip, born Charles Haynes Brogdon, was a former patient of the Statsfield Home for the Syphilitic in Unicorn, Maryland. His autopsy revealed that he was never, in fact, a zombie.
Well, his appearance could be accounted for by an extreme case of eczema and a collection of gangrenous sores. He also had an enlarged upper jaw that made it almost impossible for him to swallow the saliva that his mouth produced. Then there was the irritable bowel syndrome that accounted for the pungent musk he was known for, and probably all the moaning. Why was he always trying to bite people, though?
By the early 1970s, anti-zombieism began to creep back into American culture.
It's about lying. A white or even a Chinese can argue for the rights of blacks, but don't tell me you're black if you're not, because eventually I'm gonna find out.
Many people became disenchanted with the movement, I suppose, because they felt lied to. But that doesn't faze me. Just because a person isn't someone you thought they were doesn't mean that the person they weren't isn't saying something true.
Though they have not lost the rights they had already won, further progress has been elusive.
You still have dozens of zombies killed every year. All you have to say is, oh, he was trying to, eat my face. And that's enough for the authorities. They don't even look into it.
The right to vote is undermined by numerous obstacles. And in cases where zombies have been elected to public office, they have refused to serve. Zombies instead often cluster together in abandoned buildings and shantytowns, where frequently they are denied access to adequate health care, education, and foodstuffs.
Yes, zombies are violent, but so are bears. And I don't see anybody going around saying that bears should be put into camps.
You know, most attempts at legislation have, if anything, left a pretty bad taste in the public's mouth. The military's don't ask, don't tell policy. It ignored some pretty basic realities and did embarrass the U.S. internationally.
I won't say that every zombie will infringe on the rights of man given the opportunity. I can't see into the hearts and minds of each and every zombie. But I will say something I've said before, and I cannot stress enough. Zombies eat people.
I think zombies are where we want to be someday. And I think everyone's just jealous. You know, I'd say, other than poets, zombies feel the most. I mean, why do you think they're moaning all the time?
Indeed, the future may not look terribly bright for zombies. But the same could have been said years ago, before many open-minded citizens made the world a better place. At least for a time. With zombies, what the future holds is always a surprise.
How can the president tell a man what to do? who could tell a zombie his heart isn't true? And even the dead can bleed red, white, and blue. For this country was made for me and for you. Man and the zombie, they are one and the same. It might be a revolution that's eating your brain. So let's get together with minds that are fresh, 'cause we'll live off the land while they live off the flesh. So why can't your zombie child play with my son? He'll teach her to sing and she'll teach him to run. And all through the meadows they'll laugh and have fun, till some stupid congressman gives them a gun. The lawyers, the judges, the men with the plans look down on the dead ones they don't understand. But zombies are friendly and peaceful and grand, and they probably won't eat you, so give them your hand. They don't need our money and don't wear fancy clothes, and they don't fear the wind, they know which way it blows. And you don't need a newsman to tell you the score, 'cause they're an army of zombies. They'll give you what for? What for? La-dee-day, la-dee-day, la-dee-day.